So today we're digging into a really powerful theological perspective on marriage. It's one that frames love not just as a feeling, but as an act of sacrifice, one with some pretty serious divine consequences. We're drawing all this from a work called Sacrificial Love and the Sanctity of Marriage Oneness, and believe me, it presents a very challenging view of what it means to be one in a marriage.
Okay, so the text we're looking at pulls absolutely no punches. It kicks off with this incredibly stark statement, which sets a really serious, almost urgent tone right from the get-go. This makes it super clear that we're not just talking about simple marital advice here. From this theological view, we're talking about avoiding a profound spiritual error.
All right, so this brings us to the first big idea, love as a sacrifice. The source argues that in a marriage, love isn't just an emotion you feel or something you naturally expect. No, it's framed as a deliberate action, a conscious choice that's modeled on a very specific spiritual example.
And this is really the core of the whole argument right here. It draws this super clear line in the sand. The divine mandate, the command, is to make sacrifices for your partner. The sin, which the text says is the root cause of so many marriages breaking down, is when you flip that, when you selfishly sacrifice your partner for your own benefit.
And where does this idea come from? Well, the text points directly to this verse from Ephesians as the foundation for the entire concept. You see, the love being described here isn't passive at all. It's active, it's giving, and it's defined by the ultimate sacrifice.
Okay, so that idea of sacrifice, it leads right into our next section, which the source calls a husband's divine mandate. We're about to see how it interprets specific biblical passages, not as, gentle suggestions, but as actual binding instructions. Now, the term the text uses for this is servant leader. And this is really key, because according to this view, it's not about dominance or being the boss. It's a role that's completely defined by service, by honor, and by the heavy responsibility to reflect a divine character in how you treat your wife.
Then the source brings up this passage from 1 Peter, and this is a huge deal. It literally connects how a man treats his wife to his own spiritual life. The consequence for failing to show her consideration and honor is spelled out right there. It can actually get in the way of his prayers.
So let's just unpack what that verse is saying, according to the text. You've got these clear instructions: show consideration, pay honor, and, this is important, recognize your wife as a spiritual equal, a co-heir. And the warning is just as clear. If you fail to do this, there are direct spiritual consequences.
And it doesn't stop there. There's another really direct command that the text points to, this time from Colossians. It's so simple, but also so profound. Avoid harshness. This really shifts the focus away from grand gestures and puts it squarely on the small, daily interactions in a marriage.
So what does that actually look like day to day? Well, the source breaks it down into some really practical steps. Avoiding harshness isn't just about the words you use. It's also about patient actions and, crucially, offering grace and forgiveness. It's a recognition that, hey, every marriage is going to go through some tough times. All of this, the sacrifice, the gentleness, it all builds towards this next huge concept, the meaning of oneness. Now, this isn't just about being a team or being good partners. It's presented as something much, much deeper, a truly integrated state of being. And to understand this idea, the text takes us all the way back to the beginning, to Genesis. Adam's words when he first sees Eve. They're presented as the original poetic definition of this incredibly profound and inseparable connection.
So, what does oneness actually mean? According to this perspective, it's a state where a husband sees his wife as, well, literally part of him. When you think about it that way, intentionally harming her would be like intentionally breaking your own arm. It just becomes completely illogical, totally self-destructive.
And this idea gets hammered home with another verse from Ephesians. The logic here is pretty straightforward. Loving your wife is just a form of rational self-love and self-preservation. You nourish and care for her because, in a very real spiritual sense, she is you, just like you care for your own body.
All right, this brings us to our final section, and honestly, it's the most sobering part of this whole text. This is where the source lays out some incredibly stark warnings about the divine consequences for any husband who fails to live up to this sacred responsibility. The source makes this incredibly powerful claim. It says, flat out, mental abuse is spiritual abuse. There's no distinction drawn between different kinds of harm. From this theological standpoint, the capacity of mental abuse to break a person's spirit is taken with the absolute utmost seriousness.
And it gets even more intense.
The text argues that there's no gray area here. A husband either loves his wife or he hates her. It says his actions, not his words, are what ultimately reveal the true state of his heart. In this view, there really is no middle ground.
And this is the final word on this subject. The reason this all matters so much, the source points to this verse as the ultimate bottom line. Every single action taken in this life, and especially within the sacred bond of marriage, will face a final divine accounting. It will all be judged.
So that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on, right? After going through this framework, one that's centered on sacrifice, on oneness, and on this ultimate divine accountability, how does this ancient responsibility-heavy view of marriage challenge our modern ideas of what a partnership is supposed to look like?